Ben stopped mid-step. The pond wasn't still anymore. Its surface quivered, faint concentric ripples spreading outward like something beneath was stirring. Then the ripples reversed, pulling inward, spiraling into the center. The water sank as if draining into an invisible abyss, revealing the black, glistening bed below. The pond had always been there, nestled at the heart of the woods behind Fairhaven. It wasn't grand or picturesque, just a stagnant pool of dark water choked with reeds and framed by leaning willows. Locals called it Black Hollow Pond, though no one could remember why. Most just avoided it. Its surface seemed to drink in light, a mirrorless void that refused to ripple even in the wind. For Ben Harper, the pond was an afterthought, a quiet landmark on the edges of his unremarkable life. Ben was 52, unmarried, and a fixture of the Fairhaven petrol kiosk. He'd worked there for years, manning the register, stocking shelves, and mopping floors. A hard worker all his life but never a standout, Ben had resigned himself to being what he often called a front staff material. He wasn't bitter, just realistic. His hobbies provided a small spark of joy. Ben loved print design, a passion he'd cultivated since his teens. Over the years, he poured his free time into designing t-shirts, posters, and brochures. He took courses, read books, and practiced tirelessly. But no matter how hard he tried, his work never quite reached the level he aspired to. It was fine. Good even, but not great. Deep down, Ben knew he'd likely remain mediocre, just as he always had. Life had a way of keeping him in his place. Still, he was helpful enough and generally well-liked. His grouchiness was more bark than bite, and even his grumbled complaints couldn't hide the fact that he cared for the events and people around him. Everything changes after that fateful summer evening. On that evening, Ben ceased to be mediocre.
Toby, get back here.
Ben's aging Labrador darted through the underbrush, barking madly. It had been an uneventful day off, the kind Ben preferred. He'd taken Toby for a walk in the woods behind his house, sticking to familiar trails. But as the sun dipped low, painting the trees in copper and shadow, Toby had bolted toward the pond. Ben trudged after him, muttering curses under his breath. His knees ached from years of standing at the kiosk, and the thought of dealing with whatever mess Toby had found didn't help his mood.
Toby, I swear, if it's another raccoon...
He broke through the last line of trees and into the clearing by the pond. Toby stood at the water's edge, hackles raised, growling low and steady.
Come on, boy. What's the...
Ben stopped mid-step. The pond wasn't still anymore. Its surface quivered, faint concentric ripples spreading outward like something beneath was stirring. Then the ripples reversed, pulling inward, spiraling into the center. The water sank as if draining into an invisible abyss, revealing the black, glistening bed below.
Toby.
Ben's voice wavered. The dog whimpered and backed away, tail between his legs. For eons it slumbered. The stillness was its shroud, the pond its cradle. Time had no meaning in the dark abyss where it dwelled, only the slow, deliberate pulse of existence. Beneath layers of silt and shadow, it rested, watching the world through cracks in the veil. Now it stirred. The old one reached out, sensing the ripples it had long ignored. The edges of its awareness brushed against the beings above, their lives flickering like fireflies in the night. Among them, one shone brighter. It didn't rise to conquer or destroy, such things were beneath its interest. Perhaps the rhythms of the universe had shifted. 1,000 tiny moments, a prayer whispered in despair, the crash of a distant star, the opening of a door, something had aligned to summon it. The waters above pulled away, drawn by its awakening. Darkness bled into light as its form breached the surface. To the beings of this world, it was vast, incomprehensible, a shape that defied logic and form. It did not see with eyes but with knowing. The man before it, small, trembling, insignificant, was the beacon that had called it forth. The old one reached for him, not with malice but with intent. Ben couldn't move. The air felt heavy, pressing against his chest as the towering shadow rose from the pond. Its form shifted and writhed, the edges blurring as if it existed only partially in this world, as if it belonged to dimensions beyond comprehension. It didn't cast a shadow, it absorbed light, bending reality around it in undulating waves. A sound began to fill the clearing, not a sound exactly but a vibration that reverberated deep within Ben's chest, a resonance that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. His breath caught as a sudden chill washed over him, his body frozen between terror and awe. And then it was inside him. Not physically but in his mind, saturating his thoughts with sensations that defied logic. Oceans churned beneath alien skies the color of molten gold, their tides governed by the pull of two shattered moons. Stars danced in patterns too precise, too intricate for human understanding, constellations that seemed to whisper truths older than time itself. He felt the weight of an eternity pressing against him, the roaring silence of endless voids, the slow, deliberate unfolding of galaxies, and the crushing insignificance of his own existence. It wasn't pain but the sheer magnitude of knowing, a flood of awareness so vast it threatened to tear him apart. Ben's thoughts unraveled, his mind laid bare like an open book. His memories were sifted through as though by an unseen hand, childhood joys and regrets, quiet nights at the kiosk, sketches that never quite matched the visions in his head. Nothing was hidden. The entity saw all of him. It didn't speak, yet its presence carried an understanding that words could never convey. It was ancient, indifferent to the fleeting lives of men, yet in its fathomless gaze, it lingered on him, a single thread in the infinite tapestry of existence. And then it offered something. A spark ignited within Ben's mind. It wasn't an answer but a possibility, a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. Knowledge poured into him, not in a torrent but in a steady, deliberate stream. Principles of art and form he'd never grasped, patterns of connection he'd never seen, the delicate intricacies of human emotion laid bare before him. For reasons Ben would never know, it chose to give instead of take. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was something deeper, something unknowable. And then it was gone. The towering shadow receded, folding back into the still waters of the pond. The vibrations ceased, the air lightened, and the clearing returned to its natural stillness. The surface of Black Hollow Pond shimmered once before settling into its unbroken, dark mirror. Ben collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his body trembling from the enormity of what he had endured. Toby whimpered beside him, nudging his arm with a wet nose, his tail low but wagging hesitantly as if trying to reassure him. It was not apparent to Ben then, but something had changed. The days after his encounter were a blur. Ben's memory of the event was hazy, the details slipping through his fingers like smoke. But something had changed. He saw the world differently, sharper and clearer than ever before. Ideas for his designs came unbidden, flowing with a precision and creativity he'd never known. His hands moved with newfound confidence, translating his visions into works that stunned even him. Word spread quickly. Local businesses began seeking him out, then regional companies, then national chains. Within months, Ben's part-time gig had become a thriving enterprise. But it wasn't just his work. People noticed something else. Ben had become insightful. His grouchy exterior softened, replaced by a quiet, empathetic wisdom. Neighbors sought his advice on everything from work problems to personal struggles. By the time he was 56, Ben had built a design company with a staff of over 50 strong. He married a woman 20 years his junior, a kindred spirit drawn to his creativity and compassion. And yet, in quiet moments, guilt gnawed at him. Ben often wondered if his success was truly his. He often wondered if he was a fraud to the people around him and to the world. Had the entity gifted him these abilities, or had it taken something from him in return? Will he ever find out? Does he want to find out? Ben didn't talk about the pond. Even as his life transformed, his work gaining critical acclaim, his company growing, his marriage to a woman who brought him joy, he never returned to that clearing. As he sat by his window watching the sun dip below the horizon, the pond lingered in his thoughts. Its surface, calm and unyielding, remained a mystery, and the question he whispered into the silence would remain unanswered. Why me?